we are in a time of people ghosting you, okay? I've had very credible, experienced recruiters reach out to me for board positions, go through stages of interview, and just not hear back. We are in a time of people sending resumes and getting no feedback. We are in a time of people going through selection processes and dead silence, ghosting. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the second podcast of See Me. Do you see me? Do I see you? Can you see me? See Me is an organization which is being developed to help ambitious women define what their goals are and to achieve their full potential. We also want to support them in their lifestyle management, and we also want to help them through mentoring, lived experience coaching, to make sure that they're their full selves, both emotionally, personally, and physically. In this podcast, we're going to be talking to my special guest, Michael Schulz, who I've worked with, and I'd love for you to hear more during this session, about the value of executive coaching and lived experience mentoring as it relates to what CME is offering, but generally, does it really help? What are the benefits? How should you go about getting the right coaching support? And how should you make sure that you're maximizing your relationship with your executive coach and mentor? So, Michael, thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Eghosa. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So you have a very interesting career. And in fact, I was just saying to you before the recording started that the reason why you are actually my first guest, because our first podcast was me introducing myself and talking about CME. So you're the first guest on the CME.
It's an honor.
Yeah, you are indeed. But the reason why you are is because, one, CME is about coaching and mentoring, and your career and your expertise will speak to that. But secondly, because we have worked together on an executive committee in a very large organization, global organization. And I came to realize, as the head of people and culture, that while you may not advertise it, you really are a champion for supporting talent to reach their full potential. And in fact, at that time, through your support, I was matched, and the CEO support, I was matched with an executive coach whose job was to help me be in the succession plan to be the next CEO or in the line of CEO of that company. But also, you do go out of your way to support female talent, to make sure that where there is ambition, support is provided for that ambition to yield results. So before we kick off, I do want to say thank you for the contributions you have made to my career journey. I'm excited to have you on the CME platform. But let's kick off with asking you to tell us first about you personally, so we get to know you as a human being.
Thanks, Eghosa. Very humbling in terms of what you just said, and gives me also time for a lot of reflection. But let me tell you who I am. I'm actually a countryside boy. Grew up in the countryside to German parents, and my mother was actually quite influential in us children spreading the wings. And from that, both my sister and I, we became very international citizens living across countries, continents, different cities, etc., etc. I'm married to my wonderful wife, Antje, since 28 years. Which I think is quite an achievement in itself.
We'll have another podcast about that.
Another podcast about that.
Our listeners may want to learn how to get to 28 years of marriage.
And actually, in fact, we've known each other over 30, so quite amazing when I think about it. We have two wonderful twins, a twin boy and twin girl, who also have spread their wings, and they live in different countries from the parents.
Amazing.
In terms of professional,
yes, please.
I'm actually a lawyer by trade, as they say. Started in a very small law firm, then ventured out into some larger law firms. Swiftly started to realize it wasn't necessarily my thing because I thought it was very narrow at times and very specialized. So moved into industry. And from there, and I think we'll come to that, was lucky enough that I had 2-3 very influential people in my career, particularly who I still call mentors,
Wow.
who I can still revert to and they helped me spread my wings in business. And from there, we traveled through different companies, through different countries, very difficult ones, very pleasant ones, and still live today between different locations, and that's part of our makeup, I would say.
Amazing. You've said two things which are in my line of discussion today, because this is a conversation. We want people to watch this, be engaged, and really take a lot of learnings as they spend their time with us on this podcast. The first one which you said is at the point at which you made that big career change, and I'm sure you've made many great career changes because you're extremely successful in what you do. There were three fundamental people that you remember till this day who were instrumental and pivotal. We'll come to that, because all of us in our careers will go back to that person who invested in us, believed in us, and provided the resources to support us. That's the definition of coaching. It's the definition of mentoring, effectively, right? And I know that there are these very intellectual terms that define the difference between coaching and mentoring, but we'll use them slightly loosely here. The second point you mentioned was how many countries and cities that you've lived through. And I'll touch on it later, but the reason why I'm picking it out is because that makes you a true global human. Before a global professional, you effectively are able to identify talent in any language, in any industry, in any culture, as a result of your experience. And that's one of the things I've loved about getting to know you, working with you, and even working with you closely as I build my energy commodity company, Lisena. So before we dive into all the questions I have, you mentioned there that your mother groomed you and your sister to spread your wings. In my introduction, I said that you are a great supporter of female talent. Where did this come from, do you think?
It's a very interesting question. I mean, the way we grew up, I think, has been instrumental in that. You know, we had a strong personality mother, and we always learned from the very start that there wasn't a good or a bad or a better or a worse in terms of man or woman, right? For us, as we grew up, it was always the person. It was the human.
Right.
The gender didn't matter.
Yes.
And from that perspective, I think that is something which we were, as we say in the Germanic language, it was in the cradle, kind of. And I think from there, it kind of developed, as you say, also this cross-cultural understanding. But make no mistake, I had difficult and tough times in different cultures.
Right.
And you know, this one pivotal moment I will never forget. We had just moved from Paris, beautiful place, to Cairo, Egypt.
Wow.
Another beautiful place, but tough place.
Of course.
And I remember vividly, as we moved, I kept seeing others' cultures through my eyes. And the big switch and moment was when someone helped me understand, never try to understand someone else's culture through your own eyes. You will fail.
Wow.
Try and get to a degree that actually you see another culture through their eyes. And that then makes you helping people of this, you know, global citizen, it doesn't matter which race, which religion, which ethics, with sexual orientation, which gender, it is a human of who you like or you don't like to work with, as it happens in business.
Indeed. Indeed. You know, here we are. Our audience is effectively targeted at ambitious women, whether they are in industry or in business, who have decided they want to achieve their full potential. They have decided that they are talented and they could appreciate some help along the way. And help could be situational. It could be, I'm negotiating my next salary. I'm negotiating a new job contract. I am negotiating, you know, how to get transferred from one location or how to leave one part of the business portfolio to another part of the business portfolio. But it could also be conditional. I want to move from mid-level management to senior level management. I want to move from senior level management to C-suite. And so this will span a period of time till I achieve a specific target and goal. You mentioned moving from Paris to Cairo. I had one role where I left the entire Western world behind, and I was transferred to run Asia Pacific, including the Middle East. And I was given a culture coach. Now, I just finished my MBA, right? And I remember thinking, okay, I'm an executive now. I run some pretty big P&Ls. I was approaching about $1 billion P&L at this point. And I'm being told, your entire success in Asia Pacific will not be based on your ability to read financial statements or generate sales contracts or convince customers to give you commercial agreements. It'll be based on your ability to lead people and inspire people to follow you because you are coming from a very different culture. Now, this is a live experience which our listeners need to take away, this concept of situational mentoring. Now, someone advised me that I needed situational mentoring and paired me with someone. You moved from Paris to Cairo.
Yeah.
You had tough experiences and you learned from the experiences. Luckily, I'm hoping that it didn't burn you or rule you out of the running. Because sometimes we have had unfortunate stories where people get ruled out because they don't prepare, okay? But ultimately, how do we help some of our listeners or our See-Me target audience know when to ask for that mentoring? And this is the entire conversation around when do you seek mentoring support, either peer mentoring or coaching, or when do you accept it when offered, or when do you hopefully, through painful experiences, learn enough without burning yourself and being ruled out of the entire running. So maybe let's just talk a little bit about this idea of situational coaching and mentoring.
Let me go back to what I mentioned in terms of these very influential people in my life. And at some stage I reflected, how did this happen? Did I ask for someone to support me, or did it happen? Did someone spot me? And I think it's a little bit of a mix.
Okay.
The one person who was so instrumental, he had the ability of seeing people in a very different light.
Right.
So I defined myself as a lawyer. I was an in-house legal counsel, but I worked on a project.
Okay.
And on that project, it was multidisciplinary. He led the project. And at some stage, he came to me and said, I've seen you in action.
Okay.
Right. And I'm realizing that you actually have very different talents to what you do. Would you like to expand your horizon in your talents? Right.
Wow.
So a couple of lessons from this. On the one side, push yourself always outside of the boundary of your current job, of your role.
Okay.
When you see opportunity, volunteer.
Okay.
Say, I would really like to work on that project. Can I get involved? Here's the contribution I make. So there's a little bit of an active piece that you have to make yourself visible if you do want that next promotion, if you do want that next stepping up, etc. But sometimes in life, it really also is about timing. And I was super lucky in terms of having this person who saw different things in me. And then there's a third out. So you have to push it yourself.
Okay.
There's a little bit of timing, finding that person. And then thirdly, the organization, right?
Right.
How does the organization then say, after maybe there is a dialogue going on that I would love to do something different? How does the organization then support that situationally? Is it prepared to invest in coaching? And I'll come to that in terms of my philosophy in a moment. And why does it situationally agree that using that professional and actually making that professional very successful takes a particular intervention, such as, in your case, saying, you need to understand the culture in which you work to be able to inspire people, provide followers, etc., which is different in different cultures, etc., etc. So push yourself, volunteer, step outside, have a little bit of luck in timing. Timing is always there.
Absolutely, yes.
And then if your organization doesn't have the, I would say the instinct of saying, here's the person that needs support, push it with your line manager, with the people function, etc., to say, I think in this particular situation, it's new for me. Be humble and say, I have to learn and I need support. Then you can figure out what it is. Is it a mentoring relationship of someone outside the industry? Is it a professional coaching? Is it peer coaching? Which, by the way,
Yes.
I think is an absolute amazing game changer.
Yes.
Peer coaching. So those are probably the 3 touch points which are extremely important.
Interesting. I think I love what you're sharing about, your key takeaways, because somewhere around the 7th year in my career, I came about the 3 Fs, the amount of face time that people experience with you, and how focused you are when you finally speak to them. This concept of FaceTime requires some level of networking. You have to keep showing up.
Yeah.
But you also have to keep telling people what you want, asking for help. I would like to get to the next VP level. I would like to start my own company. I am looking for a partner in this particular area. And the more you verbalize what you require, somewhere along the line, someone will go, hey, Eghosa keeps asking for this. I can either support, or I know someone who can support. So this concept of making sure that you make yourself visible is so true. But I do want to ask you a question. Here we are, you and I, both sharing experiences of times when people believed in us. And that could overlap with, we also believed in ourselves and we're grateful for the support, and we just skyrocketed with the support provided. But it also could mean we didn't see the talent that was identified, and we thought, okay, sure, you see that talent, I'll have a go. And we surprised ourselves and we grew and achieved even more. But let's talk about one thing.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you come across people in your career who are detractors? Maybe they may be well-intentioned or not well-intentioned, and they effectively leave a not so great dent in your confidence level, your psyche, for whatever the reasons are. Okay, we don't need to explore the reasons. We know that there are many. But someone says, I don't think you're going to be the next great executive, or I don't think you'll get to this role. Because it's too easy to make it sound like we keep working, or we try to set up our companies, we try to grow our companies, and along the line, there'll always be people through lock and positioning who will say, great, I believe in you, I want to provide you these resources. Or that you go seek them yourself and pay for them, or like in Simi's case, people join the platform because they have identified that they want this support and they do want to be achieving their full potential. Can you talk a little bit about this other scenario, and has it happened to you?
The distractors?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I have still a vivid example I carried around with me until today as something to really tap into when I need to, and very specific. I was based in the UK. Mm-hmm. We had a kind of a business review meeting in Paris. It was my boss, the CEO, and me going to see his boss and my functional boss. So it was a 4-way conversation, pretty much around a new organization model and the talent and the C-level that should be sort of there. So we prepared for the meeting. I mainly prepared for the meeting. We go, we present. 3 minutes into the conversation, my boss's boss gets up, says to my boss, can I talk to you outside? Takes him outside. That was the end of the presentation and the conversation.
Wow.
So, I was absolutely distraught.
Yes.
Because we had prepared together, I had prepared together, et cetera. And in the end, to cut a long story short, it turned out that he found it utterly theoretic. It wasn't practical enough. It didn't come to the point straight away. And there was a cultural component in there because he came from a particular cultural background. We built it up in a different way.
Yes.
So the reason why I'm mentioning it, it really knocked me down.
Yes.
So he was a big distractor. I thought, well, in that sense, career kind of over plateaued, etc. So what could I have done? I could have said, look, I'm just going to bury myself in a dark hole.
Yes.
I'll go away. But actually, I then tried to convert this into, well, let's reach out to him.
Okay.
Ask him directly for feedback, not via my boss. Face it, confront it, learn from it. Say what were the things I had done not so well.
Okay.
Say what are the things we could have done much better and prepare. So, he was a big distractor. I could have reacted in a way of ignoring it and saying I've done well, etc. But it took some courage in the end to say, look, I want to hear it.
Okay.
So a big takeaway, when these situations happen, and they will happen, there will be people you don't like to work with.
Yes.
You think they're energy zappers. You think they have a major negative impact on your career. Do what is completely counterintuitive. Reach out.
Okay.
You will get hurt, because it will hurt, but it will make you so much better in your career if you try and turn that around. And by the way, Eghosa, when we worked together,
yes,
during that time, we had quite a few people who knocked us.
We did.
Right?
Yes.
And look, we're not going to talk about names here, but there was an organization that was excruciatingly tough, right? So we had a lot of knocks, and we needed to build ourselves up from that knocks. And there was one guy where I tried to do that with, and sometimes even that doesn't work. They knock you down, right?
This is true.
But again, takeaway or the nugget from this is, do the counterintuitive. When you feel there's an energy zapper and a distractor, try and least get the best out of that person that will help you in avoiding what seemingly you didn't do so overly well. Yeah.
You know, that happened to me. No, thank you for sharing that, because I if I look back and I'm thinking through my own career experience, somewhere after my 10th year in my career, I'd made quite a big move. I'd gone to do my MBA. I was given a big P&L to run in the US, in the Gulf of Mexico. And, you know, you can have these situations where truly through that person's lens, they just don't see you as talented.
Yep.
And that's fine. Yep. How do you internalize that? Now, there are two things. You could take that person's feedback, direct or indirect, as truth, or you could seek external resources to validate you. And I remember that being the first time. I didn't go to HR or someone in my organization. I reached out to my network. I joined other professional organizations. I got myself assessed, with some really good tools, some which were free. Found organizations like See Me, where other very successful and experienced industry people were offering free coaching. In some cases, I asked to be introduced to people. In some cases, I cold called. And I was reinforced by the entire structure I put around myself.
Yeah.
And I reminded myself that while there may have been learnings from this experience with that individual who gave me very different feedback to how I felt, there were also potentially adjustments that I could have made or things I could have done differently. And in some cases, there's no adjustment to be made. It's just that person. So let's accept that, right?
Absolutely.
It's just that person. It's just that situation.
Happens.
But there are cases where, upon reflection, you could take something away from it in terms of, as you said, this person came from a different culture, how to present to that person. But I do want to talk about something. I'm very tempted because it's...
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Of course, I kind of said that the takeaway is you do the opposite of the counterintuitive. In my own case, there's a whole raft of ecosystem of things that did happen. So my divisional sort of HR person, I said, look, what can we do? He hooked me up with a person outside of the industry to say, if you encounter these situations again, how do you read? How do you anticipate? We put in place some proper formal coaching, through coaching objectives. So there's a whole ecosystem. I think what you did, going out and reinforcing or getting other perspectives through so many different means and like a platform that See Me will offer is exactly the right thing. So the ecosystem needs to be as broad as it can. And interesting enough, psychologically, then that one distractor kind of becomes one voice, right?
Yes, indeed. I want to say something because See Me is going to span a couple of generations here, okay? We're talking about candidates who are either in the C-suite or ready to get into the C-suite, candidates who are ready to go for board positions, and we'll come to that. You are successfully sitting on boards of companies, how to interview and, make sure you are selected, and how to be an effective board member. But we'll also be dealing with mid-level managers, and then we'll be dealing with much younger talent. As you were talking about seeking feedback, we are in a time of people ghosting you, okay? I've had very credible, experienced recruiters reach out to me for board positions, go through stages of interview, and just not hear back. We are in a time of people sending resumes and getting no feedback. We are in a time of people going through selection processes and dead silence, ghosting.
Or not even getting a response
Not
to
even getting a
countless
response.
applications.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. So this concept that you present to someone and you go back and get feedback is fading away. So maybe inside a structured organization, it may be true, but people are freelancing.
Yeah.
We are talking about CME, which is a platform for those inside structured companies, but those who are effectively running their own business or working in an entrepreneurial setting. So it's not really true anymore that you get this constructive feedback. And I think this is where CME itself becomes very important. Yeah. Getting support, getting coached, getting assessed, understanding what your full potential is and how to really achieve your ambition. But ultimately, now there are AI tools which are supposed to help you write your resume, AI tools that are supposed to help you position you better so that you get callbacks for interviews. But we still run into the human element. Mm-hmm. And the human element of the avoidant culture of actually telling people why I didn't select you, and here's what I really thought about you. And that's why this concept of trusted coaching circles, very important. Mm-hmm. Going through structured coaching content, which CME will also offer. Going through structured coaching programs that get you from step 1 to step 2, whether on soft skills or technical skills aspect. Can we just maybe reflect? Because you select people. You deal with comp and bend, you deal with rewards, you deal with hiring very senior executives, running some very expensive coaching programs, and also psychometric testing. Yep. What happens now to candidates when there's no feedback? What should they do? Where should they get help? Really,
really a challenging question, tough question. First of all, I think the initial reaction is you feel you go into that hole and you say, well, why does no one talk to me, right?
Yes.
Why don't I get feedback? Is it avoidance? I think in this day and age, is one element because of overload. Mm-hmm. People just don't take the time to give the not so successful, or let me say, in the case you're not successful for an application in a role, they just don't want to spend the time, right? It's overload, too much work, etc. And I think also there is a human element of saying, I really don't want to give that negative
so
feedback.
We shouldn't take it personally is what you're saying?
I think, first of all, not taking it too personal. I think there's a bit of an institutional issue around too much overload. And then I also think that the human element, sadly, I think doesn't hold that strong anymore. But your question is, how otherwise do you get feedback, right? And this is where your peer network, coaching arrangements, mentoring arrangements will hugely help, because you can say, look, here's what I applied for, potentially didn't go that far, did one stage but not to the next stage.
Yes.
What do you think I'm missing today?
Right.
Both in terms of technical experience, leadership skills. Do you think there is a cultural fit for me? Because very often, I think recruiters look initially at, the cultural fit. Yeah, you can do all the AI stuff in terms of matching profiles. There's even now algorithms that run during an interview process, prompted by a series of criteria that will then say after the interview that candidate delivered against those.
Wow.
With an outcome to say this is a 60%, a 70%, an 80% fit.
Gosh.
Candidates are being advised of that. Actually, we're recording this conversation, and you say, yeah, fine, record the conversation. But what happens is algorithms run in the background that will help and support the person conducting the interview with very, very structured feedback against algorithms. So that happens. But one more time, I think the means of dealing with that is reach out to people initially in your network. Say, this has been the situation. Can you give me some insights? And if you don't, can you help me with platforms like CME to say, are there people available who want to give, who are very good in feedback and who see feedback as a constructive means of unleashing my potential, right?
Yes, indeed.
So,
Absolutely. You know, in CME, we talk about whole self-mentoring, okay? And whole self-mentoring for us is, we're not just trying to get you the next job, the next big paycheck. We want to make sure that you're well mentally, physically, emotionally. We also want to make sure that your lifestyle and how you balance that with your pursuits, your professional pursuits. And professional pursuits are, whether in business or industry, as we continue to say, that this is all taken somehow into balance. Now, here we are talking about the human element being further reduced, and people are stretched for capacity, and feedback may not be given because that capacity doesn't exist. And so they focus on the more successful candidates. And so you do want to reach out to other people who have the capacity, but also have the experience. Now, before we come to whole self-mentoring, just help me understand one thing, Michael. How have you dealt with the concept in your career? Because you've obviously transitioned successfully through a lot of companies, and you know, you're a seasoned executive yourself. On this concept of an industry and business that did not embrace mental health and well-being. And then we come into COVID, it becomes this big topic. And then, you know, previous to that, EHEs, emotional health services, were set up by companies to deal with that. Where are we going? And what value do you think that adds to someone that says, I can be the next Steve Jobs, I can be the next great founder of a company, or I could be the next great executive of a listed company? How are we supporting people through this?
Well, at a very personal level, I'm a very agile, energetic individual that needs movement, right? I need to burn the calories I take in, right? So it's a natural thing.
Sure.
And what it told me in my career is that if one of the elements, emotional, physical, mental, was out of sync, I was not able to perform.
Okay.
And just simply that realization of, you have to find a balance. You can do things yourself.
Sure.
I'll come to that in a second. Then there's an organization aspect. And then I'll say the name here. I had the absolute wonderful pleasure of being coached in my last executive role by a very famous INSEAD professor and guy, Manfred Ketz de Vries. Manfred is a wonderful individual. Manfred would start every single coaching session with one question. Michael, how are you?
Wow.
Right. So it is about the holistic piece of, how do you feel? Not just what have you done, what have you delivered, against what, etc., etc. So I think in coaching, that holistic approach, looking at an individual, well, it requires relationship, and it requires time to have that relationship. But if the coach focuses on bringing that to life, bringing the awareness that you know, it's important, and the balance, asking you some very tough and challenging questions, right? In terms of saying, by the way, you told me last time that you want to change location. And he says, does your wife agree?
Wow.
Right. As being a key stakeholder in the decision. So questions at the mental, emotional level that really make you reflect. So I think that's one. In terms of, that's the coaching element. In terms of organizations, I still believe that many organizations, and particularly in the region where we are sitting at the moment, are behind in terms of looking at well-being as one of the biggest engagement drivers, and engagement drivers being one of the biggest drivers of employee experience, and employee experience being the biggest driver equal customer experience. I think the region is behind. It's coming, I think, more and more into the fold to see well-being not just as offering a nice little course down the road, but look at this very holistically in terms of, how is our workplace structured? Is my workplace, does it inspire me? Or do I come into a dark room? Workplace is one, extremely important. Then mindset of line managers in the way they manage me. do I have a quality line manager that cares about me, right?
Right.
Very different elements of well-being.
Yes.
Of course, work-life balance is one that always comes to mind, but the way you work, and I call it work and non-work balance, right? Because why is the one life? Why is the other not life? I just can't quite relate to that. But anyways,
I like that one. I'm going to borrow that.
There is so many different aspects of well-being in an organization. Work, as I said, workplace is very important. My line manager quality is very important. The support I get when I make a request. Can I live my own purpose in this organization?
Interesting.
Do I have meaning in this organization, right? I think it's one of the biggest finds of well-being, or in terms of engagement, that purpose has become so strong post-COVID specifically.
Yes.
And not just can I identify myself with that and can I align with the company purpose, can I live my own purpose in this organization? So well-being has become much, much broader than sort of offering the gym course or whatever. But I think fundamentally to an organization health, and McKinsey has the big OHI, Organization Health Index, which is meant in personal health, it's meant in organization health, but it plays a bigger and a bigger role right through to me as a coach helping coachees, holistic looking at mind, body, soul, becomes, I think, absolutely. A critical element.
I'm hearing you say one thing. I'm hearing you say that effective coaches, mentors are people who are concerned about your whole self. I had the executive coach. I've had several coaches pegged to me throughout my life, through my MBA program, some selected for me. And in later years, some that I've gone to seek by myself to solve a particular, area of interest or particular situational issue that I had, which I wanted to, either move from step A to step B on. Now, one particular coach who I thought was very effective asked me some very poignant questions, which troubles women. Do you plan to get married? You've called me saying I should coach you on how to get a board role, but you've lived in so many countries. What are your personal plans? Do you plan to have children? Do you not plan to have children? Women face fertility issues. Some can not have children. Some will say they have not had children because of the type of jobs they've done or the personal pursuits. Some regret it. Some are happy with their choices. Medical situations arise. We face loss over the years. Maybe you get married, don't get married, get divorced, lose a partner. There are all these intricacies that women have to solve for. So it's a fallacy to just be pegged to a coach to help you get to the next target or help you make your business so much more successful. An effective coach needs to look at your whole self. And that's why CME says whole self mentoring. But there's another area which I'm passionate about. In my TED Talk many years ago, I mentioned that I'd come to find out that I was in a 30% less salary bracket than an individual who was of a different gender, a male, doing the same job, and in fact, a group of males doing the same job. And how I found out was fortuitous, and I campaigned and got the salary increase. And since then, one of the things I'm passionate about is helping women negotiate pay packages if they're taking a new job, negotiate the T's and C's of their contract, but most importantly, negotiate pay raises within the companies where they work. And as business owners, making sure that we get what's due to what is being paid to other genders. Financial well-being. We're talking about whole self-mentoring, financial well-being, financial coaching for women, how to make sure we help you make the money, but when you make the money, what do you do with the money? It's a real thing that, financial education for women needs to be driven purposefully. It's not something that women get because the boys sit together, they talk about where to invest, what stock to buy, what company to back because there's an IPO coming up. That doesn't really happen organically around women. So we go from talking about making sure you get a coach that thinks of your whole self, but let's not forget that whole self mentoring includes this financial element as well. What is your experience around this aspect of including financial considerations in helping female talent?
I think it's getting stronger and stronger, and particularly with legislation that does require gender pay gap publications, particularly in United Kingdom, but also on continental Europe. So gender pay gap analysis, I think, becomes stronger and stronger. It's now wired into legislation, and companies have to adopt it. So there's that what I call the external factor.
Okay.
I always think of, you mentioned the point of internal pay raises, etc.
Yes.
How do you do that? I think companies who think of managing pay in a way that you look at a role and the market kind of determines what that role is worth.
Yes.
Of course, the market is made up of men and women in those roles. But if you're very agnostic to the gender, you will apply, say, a pay range and look at, is this person, this human being, positioned against that pay scale below the median, above the median, around the median, etc., etc. And if you have a policy in the company to say, I want to pay my people more than just standard, term medium,
yes, then
you will, as good people managers, as good people leaders, you would do that independently of the gender.
Okay.
Right? So if pay time comes up and you look at data with no indication of name and gender, and you say, this person is below the median of the pay range, we have to make sure that at least in 2 steps, we'll get the person to that. If that means 20-25% of increase over 2 years, it doesn't matter. So if companies de-genderize these reviews without name initially, etc., I think there's a very, very good chance that you'll move through gender parity much more swiftly, and you let the market decide what that actually is. And then
interesting.
And then the last point, I haven't actually seen it a lot, specific support for, let's say, financial counseling or financial skills. In organizations. I do come from an organization that actually has products that promotes female entrepreneurship and therefore female access to the financial market.
Yes.
In a country where the banking rate is probably, in Pakistan, below 30, below 40%, right? So we actually, as a company, have offered products that help that in a society where there's a huge disparity. But in terms of internal, looking at your own colleagues, at your own people, at your own staff, I think it's something that needs to be promoted. Sure. I think it's something that could, CME could also help with, making it more visible as a need. But I haven't seen it as a prominent element.
Interesting.
But again, one takeaway: if you're in that position as a woman, and it comes to pay review, ask those who conduct the pay reviews, how do you do it?
Right.
Tell me whether the market decides. Tell me whether name decides.
Yes.
Tell me whether gender decides.
Yes. Right. I love what you said. De-genderize. I don't think I've come across that. Anyone who's done an MBA would have come across business cases where they take out the he, she, or they split the class in 2, and half of the class gets the business case with he, and half gets the business case with she. And there are always these biases that come to life. Yep. She's difficult, or she's pushy, she's bossy. But the guy is seen as assertive and effectively doing his job. And anyone who's done an MBA will tell you that they've been brought through these programs because you do the MBA to become a leader. And as a leader, you need to understand that when gender is taken into account, unconscious biases can show up. I think I've shared with you that there's a business case which I wrote out of my alma mater, which I teach every year, and I've been teaching for about 12, 13 years. And in fact, Professor Oriaikhi is releasing a book and writing a chapter on this business case. We wrote the business case in such a way that we didn't list my gender. Mm-hmm. And every year when I teach the class, I sit in this booth where they cannot see me and they don't know I'm there. And so I come out at the end to answer questions which they will have. But Professor gets to this part of the business case where he says, what do you think about this individual?
Amazing.
And it's interesting to hear the part of the class that think I'm male and the feedback and how critical the feedback is for the part of the class that think I'm female. It's unbelievable, the differences. No one ever says it doesn't matter if it's male or female. My thoughts on the business case remain the same. And so unconscious bias, unfortunately, remains. We may not solve it, but we're helping people understand little nuggets and things that they can do to ensure that they don't find themselves in very big pay gaps or unconscious biases that are ruling them out from achieving their full potential.
If we just rely on individuals driving to the very point, gender parity in pay, it's not enough. It needs to be institutionalized.
Yes.
And hence my approach, degenderizing pay reviews.
I love that.
But it has to be both. It has to be inspirational leaders that set the standards, set the tone, but without an institutionalized process or framework or system, unfortunately, it won't work. So I think it needs to happen at both ends.
Interesting.
I don't know whether you knew or read. I think, and I might get the data a little bit wrong, but it's the message. Women in Germany worked for free against their male colleagues until, I think, the end of March.
Wow.
Right. Which tells you that even in developed societies where you think, these topics have progressed, there is still a long way to go. This is why you need legislation, regulation, in my mind, setting the framework. But you need the leaders who believe it, and you need the institution that will sustain it going forward.
You need organizations that campaign for change, for example, or become a voice driver for change. There's a meme which I see all the time on social media about stay-at-home moms. If you calculate the number of hours that they work and they were in a paid job, it comes to somewhere just under $200,000 a year. And it's unbelievable, when you think about that there are talented women who, by virtue of choosing to honor their families and raise their children, are not being considered, and all that potential effectively not being rewarded.
In fact, I always think it should be different. It should be the opposite way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It should be the opposite way.
It should be. Right. It should be. But again, these are sort of this is why See Me lives. Look, here we are talking about talented people and helping them achieve their full potential. And I want to go back to this point on financial well-being, because whole self-mentoring, I honor, young women who have launched podcasts around helping young girls invest, or understanding how best to compound their money, or how best to make sure that financially they stand up for themselves. Because unfortunately, our target audience, women, if they haven't been lucky enough to be exposed to figures who have brought them through proper financial coaching, think I'll get married and my husband will take care of it.
Yeah.
I'll get married and my husband will figure out where we invest and, how we grow our income, or, how we effectively participate either in the stock market or in the property market or in any other vehicle where you want to invest your money. So whole self-mentoring for See Me is very focused on not only just the emotional, social, well-being, mental, but the financial coaching aspect as well for us to be very key. Look, as we start to wrap up, I want to make sure people have key things that they leave this session with. We've talked about a lot. I mean, your experience is very vast, so we could probably keep going and we'll have you come back to another session. But, we will offer masterclasses where we'll do, 3 short courses where people can actually go and pick a specific content. We will offer articles, and I know you've offered to write a few articles beyond the podcast. We'll release the podcast as well on all the different platforms. I just want to ask you a question around, as we're bringing this to a close. When you think about all these resources, they're the soft skills and they're the hard skills. We're talking about gender biases. I just feel remiss if I don't mention on the soft skill side how women are perceived. And oftentimes we have to spend a lot of time getting coached on how to express ourselves so that we're taking just as seriously. I did mechanical engineering, and I realized I had to only speak in numbers and very technical terms. Otherwise, very quickly, I was judged as not having the technical content as my male counterparts, for example. It didn't change my talent level. It didn't change what my potential was to achieve an end goal in terms of how great I could be in the organization or where I could go. So mentoring as far as soft skills, hard skills, what is your take?
On the hard skill side, a mentor can be very good and instrumental if, for instance, you have joined a different industry.
Okay.
Right. Which does happen, which does occur, right? Probably not at the C level once you have your track record. But for women and men before that, changing of industry happens. Therefore, a mentor can be instrumental in imparting industry technical understanding and knowledge. By the way, when I joined telecoms, I had someone that helped me with understanding telecoms in a very loose mentoring capacity, but is very helpful. So I think there is a space, and there's other reasons why technical competence is important and mentoring can help, right? But look, in the end, as we progress in our careers, the one big differentiator becomes your soft skills, your empathetic skills, understanding your own emotion, others' emotion, to be able to act upon, your influencing skills, because organizations today are not command and control, they matrixed, they fast spread, they're across different countries, so influencing skills.
Ability to build relationships.
Relationship building, which is interesting. So my view is that, and from actually the coaching, when I was a coachee, most of the elements were on the behavioral side.
Okay.
Now that I'm someone helping coachees as a coach, is not different.
Interesting.
Mostly it's around behavioral, observable behavioral change that is more linked to what people call the soft side of an individual than the hard side. Because a coach will barely teach you financial skills to be able to, in a DCF calculation, to assess a deal, right?
Yes.
But what the coach might do is, how do you approach going and selling your strategy?
Okay.
And then if you face obstruction, how do you deal with that?
Interesting.
If you face failure and rejection, how do you deal with that? So it's very hard to say and put any percentages on that. But in my experience, mentoring as well as coaching, I think today focuses very often on the soft skill sides. No, it's not to say that someone needs help with developing a strategy, articulating it, selling it, executing it, of course. And these are sort of hard skills, but very, very often it's around changing behavior, right? How you lead, how you manage, how you build relationship.
That's a good one. And that almost leads me to want to ask you, how should candidates measure whether or not this relationship is yielding any success?
The coaching relationship?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, look, I'm a super big proponent of anyone who suggests to do coaching to look at it not in terms of cost, but look at it in terms of return on the investment. So there's an expense, there's a sum of money that will yield a result.
Okay.
And one can be very simple about these things. There's methods such as goal and KPI alignment. So in an organization, you have a scorecard, has set goals, and then you align KPIs to that. For instance, if your sales has to increase by 10%, you say, if the coach helps you with the sales strategy and selling it, maybe it's 15. So it's goal KPI alignment. But there's also one thing which is called, from the very official ROI Institute, there's an institute that's called the ROI, and it's a very simple equation. It's your cost divided by your net benefits. Brackets net benefits is benefits minus the cost times 100. Very simple. So the ingenuity and the creativity to come up with what are the benefits of that coaching. Am I being asked to, for instance, increase engagement in my team? You could put a value on that. Am I being asked? Value, for instance, could be very simple, could be have sick days reduced in my team, in my organization. You can quantify and finance sick days, etc., etc. Or Is it around ensuring that retention in my team is increasing or turnover is decreasing? Plus. You quantify these benefits, and funny enough, all of a sudden, you will see that the expense relate to the output of hopefully where there is a causal relationship with the coaching. It's massive.
Interesting.
Often you literally, when you do that, you're not in the 1x or 2x, you're often in the 50x or 60x. And I have a few examples of showcasing that. So you have to think of it in terms of return.
I hope that will be in the article that you write, which we'll post on our website, so people can actually go.
There's going to be a very short and small section.
Okay, good. Thank you.
By the way, you can go from, as I said, from very light to very comprehensive. But the mindset of saying it's not a cost, it's an investment, and investment creates return. How do I express that return is probably a differentiator. If in an organization you ask for, can I have coaching? And by the way, there will be return, and I will help you quantifying that.
Okay.
Very different approach.
I'm almost tempted generationally to worry about competing time issues. I got to check Instagram, I need to check Twitter, and now I need to spend all these hours on coaching. What should I spend my time on? I could be doing an online course somewhere else. I could be spending time with my coach. Again, let's make sure that's in your article, because I think in this generation, there's so many things that compete for people's time. And people don't think so laterally about how much money am I going to pay versus the benefit I'm going to get out of it. Sometimes it just comes down to very simply, my time is being competed for. What should I spend my time on? And that decision needs to be made even before you think about the semantics on, the financial investment. I want to ask you one question, Michael.
Yes.
What is the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Say again?
What is the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Coaching is much more performance orientated in your job against certain targets.
Right.
Whilst mentoring is really much more long-term. It's much more, it's even more relationship-based, and it usually is career-based.
Yes.
Right. Now, of course, career does have performance elements, and it's not excluded. And in my mind, often it's a little bit blurred. You move from one to the other. But one of the big differentiators is coaching is usually a time-bound usually medium to short-term relationship in a coach and a coachee that looks at improving certain skills that enhances organization performance through that person. The mentoring is really I always call it a source of inspiration, a source of guidance, much less breathing down your neck to get something done, right? It's more, have you seen this in you, your talent? Is there another angle? How's your career going? And often, I think mentors, the assignment of a mentor often is also that the mentor tends to be more senior to the mentee, i.e. in terms of senior, I mean seniority and experience, and can impart that knowledge. At the coach level, I can coach peers, I can coach a CEO, and you say it's level playing field. But with a mentorship, usually you have that wisdom that often a mentor imparts. So those, and there's other differences. And by the way, mentorship usually is running through a much longer time. Remember what I said at the beginning of the conversation. Absolutely. This guy, Keith, for me, goes back to 2025,
yes,
2005, yes, 2006,
yes, wow.
And it occurs, right? So mentors, you should always look upon. It's not a transactional piece. I need to get something.
Yes.
It's a very long-term relationship part. Yeah.
I'm so happy you explained that, because CME does differentiate and does provide both, and we hope that people understand how to take advantage of both. Michael, with your long experience and all the achievements that you've made, do you have any predictions in terms of how women should continue to navigate this concept of achieving their full potential and realizing their full ambition?
I think I often see one thing in women I work with, I support, I mentor, and I coach, and I've done so in operating roles and then as a coach, which is this element of thinking that I'm not level.
Wow.
I need to do something even better to compensate. You said, in mechanical engineering, I had to be. If that mindset shift will happen through education, through parenting, through learning in general, and if that shift goes away to say, you start from a level playing field,
yes,
and society believes that, then women don't always have to believe they have to catch up.
Interesting.
This is what I've tried with the last two very, very talented women to say. Don't think you have to do extra.
Okay.
You're already there.
Okay.
Right? So it's a confidence piece, and society needs to help build confidence from the very start, from when you're that little to when you grow up. So it's at very different junctions of your life, but in reality, if women can start at level playing field in their confidence level, I think it will make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much for joining our podcast today. We hope you've taken a lot of nuggets. Don't forget to check out all the resources which we mentioned, the articles, our masterclass sessions, and certainly the podcast and all the different shorts and snippets which will come out of the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you, and we look forward to having you on the next session, where we'll have another interesting discussion around helping women achieve their full potential and realizing their ambitions. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Eghosa. It's been an absolute pleasure. We could have continued for another couple of hours. Thank you.
We'll see you back again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.